everybody, it's Eric Pappenfuss. It's Friday, so it must be a buy day, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about Philadelphia bookbinders in the early American Republic. Why? Because one of the most interesting books recently came in that was bound in Philadelphia in 1832, and I wanted to share that with you. So let's get right to it. Opening up this week's box, we have one of the more remarkable books that has ever come into the store. And if you look closely at the book, you'll see that on the top in type it says Bound to the Centennial Procession, February 22nd, 1832, by James Price and W.J. Abel. James Price and W.J. Abel were both bookbinders in Philadelphia at the time. But let's talk about this procession. So this is a procession on the 100th anniversary of George Washington's birth. It took place in Philly, and I did some research about the procession and discovered it was a remarkable parade, because it started, Amanda, with all the veterans of the American Revolution. So this is 50 years after the Revolution, so you can imagine many of them were on horseback, others were in carriages, and then it had the veterans of the War of 1812, and then it had a remarkable thing. It had a series of floats for all of the trades that were organized in Philadelphia at the time. It included, and here's a list of the procession that I printed out. It included the hatters and the bakers and the glass manufacturers and the cabinet makers and the builders and the tailors and the weavers and the spinners. And they kept just coming in this parade until eventually you had a float which had the printers on it, and then another float which had the bookbinders. And I think that's important because the printers and the bookbinders were different trades at the time. And on top of these floats were the tradesmen actually working and doing things. So this book was actually bound while the parade was moving along. And we know this because there is an example of several things that were printed by the printers on their float during this parade and just sort of thrown into the crowd that were then saved as souvenirs, poems and odes to George Washington. One of them says on the back of it, "Thrown through my window on Chestnut Street." So this is really pretty neat stuff. Now, they probably only got to bind one book over the course of the parade, and they pulled out all the stops in this. Now, Abel also signed this book. If you look here on the inside, so it was his copy of the book. And what was the book? Well, the book, appropriately, was John Marshall's Life of George Washington, Volume 1, which was published back in 1805 in Philadelphia. So it's the first edition of Life of George Washington. When we found this book, and it came from another bookstore in Pennsylvania, it was in horrible condition. The spine had come off, but the board was still present. And I took it to Tony Haverstick in Lancaster, our binder. Go back to season 1 if you want to see a video of inside of his print shop. And what he did was he recreated the spine, keeping the original material. So if you look at the book, he really did a wonderful job. Can you see, Amanda, that was what was left of the original spine. And then he rebacked it with a new spine, and then he even matched the delicate gold work along the bottom of the spine. Now, another interesting thing about this book is that I'm not sure what type of leather it is. Let's put it down here in the good light, and can you get a zoom-in picture of that leather? Well, it's a very interesting type of leather because it has this horizontal grain to it, which is unlike anything that I've actually seen. And I'm wondering if it might be a special leather to commemorate Washington. And if it was, I'm thinking it might be mule leather. Do you know why? Because George Washington was known as the father of the American mule, among other things. So in his long list of biographical accomplishments, this one isn't too high, but they still raise mules on the farm at Mount Vernon today. He famously got a donkey imported from like the King of Spain to Mount Vernon, and he bred it with his mares, and he was the first farmer to breed mules. And by the end of his life in 1799, there were like 40 or 50 mules at Mount Vernon, and he believed that this was the ultimate work animal, had the most discipline, got the most done, and he was a big backer. So could it be that Abel and Price got some mule leather in honor of Washington? I think it's possible. Well, we know what it's not, and so I thought I'd use this as an opportunity to show you different types of bookbinding material that was used at that time in America. And if you look over here against our wall, We have lots of examples of leather bindings, many from that period. All those books, by the way, $50 or less, so lots of great bargains. But if you come up close, this book is bound in calf. And you can tell it's bound in calf, Amanda, because it's got this smooth finish to it. You don't see the grain of the leather like you see on that other one. This book is bound in goat, and it's called Morocco along here, along the spine, because it's a dyed goat, and it has this sort of marbleized, can you see the marbleized little dots on it? That's how you can tell goat. Pigskin looks like this with the sort of triangular looks. Pigskin was used very early in printing and more in Victorian times as a Victorian binding. And most of the books, and this is vellum, which is an untanned form of leather that was often used in early printing. But most books in Philadelphia in the time of the early Republic were actually bound in humble sheep. And sheep, unlike calf, you can see the grain. It was a little cheaper. It tends to fall apart. It's just a random book published in Philadelphia in 1801 in sort of less expensive sheep. So I think when they bound this book, Amanda, they probably wanted a special type of leather. It's been dyed, clearly, and maybe it's mule. If anyone's watching this at home and has any idea, let me know. Now, there's one more exciting thing about this book, which is when the binder went home after the parade, he took the ribbon off that he was wearing on his lapel, and he put it inside the book, where it still is to this day. There is an original parade ribbon from the 1832 procession in Philadelphia. I've seen ribbons in books before. It's one interesting way to actually preserve something of such an ephemeral nature, but pretty awesome to still have an original Washington ribbon in a book. That book is on the way out the door because I'm afraid it's already sold, and it's sold to somebody who is helping me research the book, interestingly enough. 1832 was also the year that another famous Philadelphia bookbinder died, and that is a person by the name of Jane Aiken. She was very famous as one of the earliest female bookbinders in the United States. You can see she's also a printer. She printed this particular book, which is called A Parent's Friend. Now, Jane Aiken starts way back in the 1780s, and you know what, Amanda? She participates in the first strike of any organized labor group in the United States. It was a group of printers that were striking for a higher wage. And the way it worked is, you see a lot of times that the books are printed for other people. They're sometimes printed for the masters of the house. Sometimes they're printed for booksellers. It has to do with all the different trades. Well, in 1786, the journeyman printers, of which Jane Aiken was one, were seeing wages cut. And at the same time that the new nation was expanding, they struck and they eventually won. They won concessions, considered the first organized strike in American labor history. And she may have been the first woman to ever participate in such a strike, which is really neat. Just real quick, this is also a great work of feminist scholarship because it basically tells you how to raise your young children, but it basically says it shouldn't just be women. I love this part, Amanda. It says, the mother is not the only person concerned in the management of children. The father has an equal interest in their welfare and ought to assist in everything that respects either the improvement of the body or mind. It is a pity that men should be so inattentive to this matter. Well, pretty early, interesting work. Now, as a binding, this is calf, and Philadelphia binding sort of has the hallmark of these flat, not raised bands, and these beautiful Morocco labels with the wavy gold lines. Jane Aiken, a fascinating bookbinder from Philadelphia and somebody worth additional research. Well, finally, we're going to end with a really funny book. And this book just came in through bookbinding this past week. And it is a look of holy visions found in decaying food. And it includes such amazing things as the rotting grape, Virgin Mary, which was found by Becky Ginn in Arlington, Texas. It also has Jesus on a grilled chicken breast, which was discovered at dinner by David Martin in Syracuse, New York. But the ultimate vision, Amanda, the ultimate vision was found in a pack of Cheetos, and it is the cheeses. Just look at that. Well, thanks for watching another Buy Day. We'll see you next Friday and every Friday for more adventures in the world of books.